Coming up in the latest instalment of Netball Unlocked, we review round 1 of the Netball Super League on and off the court as Mavericks, Rhinos, Pulse and Lightning are first on the board with victories and no bonus point defeats. Former Dragons captain, former Wales co-captain Clare Jones checks in to let us know what she's up to, and as well as give us her thoughts on the early weeks of the season, she'll help us preview round 2. And Sam Bird is our guest for the Unlocked series. We'll hear from her on her career, the NSL and life as a CEO and head coach at the same time. Lots to get stuck into, so let's get on with it. Hello everybody, it's me, I'm back again, Paul Prendeville. I've got 2 friends with me today. Chloe Merrill is with me, and before we get stuck into everything else, I'm delighted to say Clare Jones is alongside us. Hello Clare.
Hi, hello team, how are we?
We're very good. We're very pleased to have you. We're very pleased to have you on board. And I was going to say we haven't seen you on a netball court for a while, but that's technically not true. I saw you a couple of weeks ago playing Prem netball. Claire, can you not get enough of this?
Oh, it was always going to be hard to go kind of completely cold turkey. So for the season, I've been playing back with my Prem squad with Hucklecoat. So I've been enjoying kind of that gradual step away from the court. So that's been a good season, I think, so far with them.
And Claire, you've been retired now for over a year. How has it been stepping back from that game, from the game at an elite level?
Oh my goodness, it's been quite a transition. I think, first and foremost, I feel like I've really kind of been given that gift of time, and just being able to kind of connect back with my family. I've got a beautiful 2-year-old nephew who I just can't get enough of, and so to be able to be with him right from birth and be able to even go through his milestones at the moment is something that I don't think I would have been probably as involved with if I was still involved in the game, which kind of makes you feel a bit sad that you would tend to miss those things and you reflect on how much you have missed throughout the years. But I'm certainly really enjoying making up for that time, just trying to give back to friends and family, as well as the sport as well, just really loving keeping my foot in the door and trying to kind of use my skills as a psychologist and bringing them into the sport by working with young athletes, coaches, staff, etc., and getting people better educated around their well-being and mental health.
You touched on what you're up to now, Claire. Like I'm not amazed by what netballers seem to juggle. Like it astonishes me, like what careers you guys are all up to and everything. So you're obviously a clinical psychologist. How did doing that with your netball career and now obviously doing it kind of as your sole career, how did the two things kind of marry up? How much was it? How much time did you actually have?
So I think one thing I don't miss is, on those bus journeys, I'd be kind of relentlessly typing my essays, or in the Commonwealth Games, I actually had my first job interview for my very first qualified post. So that juggling act and writing my PhD alongside kind of prepping for whoever we had next, I don't quite miss. At the time, I really kind of buzzed off the adrenaline, and it got me out of playing heads up on the bus and whatnot. I think initially for me they kind of went hand in hand, and I think the more I grew as a psychologist, actually the more mature I came as a player, kind of as my game went on as well. I think we talk about pressure, and understanding yourself, how you deal with pressure. That then kind of translated on court for myself, and you learn to love then how to deal with pressure, play under pressure. I think then when I was having thoughts about retirement and stepping away, I think I started to notice more and more how much of a lack of education we have around how to deal with anxiety, how to deal with those worries. And I started to see almost a lot of avoidance, I would say, of wanting to feel those uncomfortable feelings. And I think then the more I started to look beyond netball, I kind of saw a little bit of a gap, if you like, of how I can still marry those two together. And that's kind of what I've been working on. So I'm still working with the NHS. I do that as my full-time role in older adults mental health. But then alongside of that, I've been dabbling in some coaching, still playing Prem, but then also building a workshop around how we can educate athletes, coaching, wider staff members around well-being, mental health, strategies to support your own well-being, and it not being something to be afraid of. And actually, if we can really take charge and empower ourselves on our well-being, that can only enhance our performance. So that's something I'm really excited about at the moment, and spreading that message.
That's so cool.
Yeah,
isn't it?
that's super interesting. I suppose at a critical juncture for netball as well, as it embarks on this brand new journey. We often talk about all the extras that go with a professional sport, and it feels like that's definitely got a role to play going forward, right?
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think what's quickly forgotten at the moment, and when we've come into this league, is the level of uncertainty the girls and the athletes were dealing with before knowing how many franchise we'd have, how many numbers in a squad we'd have. Girls debating, can they still continue doing a job? Are they going to have to leave region, etc.? There was so much uncertainty that actually you could understand why there would be nerves or anxiety going into this new league and this new era. And that's where I believe, culture absolutely was going to be critical for these franchises stepping into Netball 2.0 to get these girls comfortable, calm, and feel more reassured and feel more confident of what their future looks like.
And do you find when you're working at the moment with athletes that there is a big gap, sort of in mental health language, mental health awareness, and particularly in women, right? Because we're talking about netball here.
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's definitely getting better, but I still don't think we're doing it enough. So I think, when we talk about professionalism, it's a bit, you'd never neglect your body, you'd never neglect your physical well-being, how you prepare physically for a game, especially now when we're supposed to be more contested, for example. Now, for me, the mental side is as important as the physical side. They're not separate by any means, and actually our brain is one of our biggest controllers, and quite often can feed into how we feel physically. So I think through no one's fault, but we don't have the right level of education, in my opinion. And I think going forward, that needs to be a priority. You look at the Australian League, every franchise has either a sports psychologist or a clinical psychologist umbrella-ing the franchise, so there's easy access at all times. And I think those roles need to be taken as seriously as our physios, in my opinion.
It's incredible. We could probably chat about this for an entire episode, to be fair, Claire. But we've also got netball to talk about, actually netball. So how connected are you with the Super League? Have you been? Did you go and watch the Dragons at the weekend? Have you just been watching on YouTube or TV? What how have you been staying in touch?
So far, I've just been watching all on TV. I absolutely have plans to go and watch. It'll be so nice to be able to just be there with friends, etc. Of course, it'll be great to be back at some point in the fortress that is, of course, Cardiff Dragons. But I'm a little far away for that at the moment. I'm all the way in West Sussex. Yes, yeah, but no, absolutely. And still got, very good friends competing and as well as commentating now. So, no, I think it would be... I can't see myself kind of stepping away from my interest in that anytime soon.
Good, because let's crack on.
Here we go, round one. So much to talk about, but I think before we get on to the action on the court, I think we need to start with it off it. And I would like to start with presentation. I think it's fair to say we experienced quite a few teething problems in quite a few different departments. For those that know me, in the 3 episodes we've put out, my gripe has always been with stats, and I didn't think it would be possible that we were going to enter a professionalised period of netball, having gone backwards. But we've gone backwards in stats. First of all, we seem to have lost the archive that we had, which I think is really frustrating, because when we want to look at head-to-heads, when we want to make cross comparisons, we can't at the moment for some reason. The information is factually correct that's currently on the website. It's difficult to read. It's presented very strangely. I can't quite get my head around a lot of it. And then, to be fair to the league, I put out a tweet on opening night when I realised that this wasn't going to be functioning properly. I couldn't see anything live. So I asked, can anyone see anything? Because I was getting a 404. And they actually responded to me on Twitter with, hi, Chloe, we are currently experiencing technical issues impacting our live match centre and the availability of live statistics for this evening's game. Please bear with us as we work to resolve this. So I sort of optimistically thought that might just be the opening games, but then it evolved over the weekend. And I found when I was watching Thunder Lightning, stats were coming in sort of live-ish, but they weren't coming down in quarters. And I just can't make sense of that, because that's how we need to interpret the game, surely, quarter by quarter. But it was accumulating as totals. So I don't know. Look, we have a new website. It's launched. And I'm not sure if it's got the mechanisms yet in place. But why are we launching a website so close to the start of the league that can't support this function of stats? I don't know. What do you guys think?
I'll go to Claire first, and I'll jump in afterwards. Go on, Claire.
Yeah, Chloe, I think I would echo a lot of those frustrations, and I think I'm probably putting my player's hat on now, because I'm imagining the level of scrutiny that the girls are under, especially the pressure with only having 10 in a squad. They've also, a lot of these girls have come off an intense international series. We've also had the super shot introduced. Again, it's constantly gaining pressure. And it's been thrusted upon the girls. You're now in a professional league. You have to perform. You have to do X, Y, Z. And again, from memory, those bubbles that you're in your franchises, you are working tirelessly, relentlessly. You put in all the work that you possibly can to go out and give a good performance. Now when we go off court, for me, there has to be a level of expectation that administration are held at the same level of scrutiny as what players are. You look at things as a whole, we're one team, okay? Players wouldn't be there unless kind of administrators were doing their job, etc., etc. And I think, again, this comes down to your whole culture of netball. It's equally as important that people are getting names right, stats right, updating a website as it is a player is to perform for their franchise. They both go hand in hand for me. And it's amazing. I think sometimes what can be lost is when that administration is spot on, it can make players feel so special. It can lift your energy, it can boost you. And again, how that has an impact on your well-being and your performance, it only elevates it. So it does. I can remember actually there was a graphic put on Twitter, and it was the starting 7 in our Dragons match, and it actually had, this was obviously 2 years ago, Chelsea Beard photographed as the wing defender, but it had my name underneath, and again, we can take this quite joking, and we can take it quite lightly. And I think I ended up replying to Chelsea, how was your debut at Wing D? But it feels sad that 2 years down the line, we're having quite similar mistakes. So I'm with you, Chloe. I think there needs to be a level of accountability from top down in terms of that administration, making sure kind of the website is up and running and ready to go. And that is personally where I'd like to see kind of pressure put, if you like, to get those things right.
I think it's fair. Look, and just kind of on that, I'm someone who's written match reports for a number of sports. I love writing reports about tennis. Like, it's my favourite thing to do because there are numbers everywhere. You can see the times sort of Federer and Nadal have played against each other, what courts they've played on, the difference, aces served, go back into each individual match, see how many times, Federer has won from 2-0 up, or how many times Nadal has come from 2-0 down. You could go on and on and on and on with it. Information is so important. And clearly, Chloe and I's capacity as journalists, the more information you have, the more you're able to tell people's story, the more you're able to kind of do a really fun interview with someone because you've got an awful lot of information to back it up. The more you can set a scene for a rivalry match that, a team might not have won for 5 years. And that sets a scene, that creates narratives. These things are super, super important. So I completely agree with where you're both coming from on that front. Now, to play devil's advocate, we asked a Super League and their email response, which I've just checked, Chloe, actually, because we did get a response. And they say they're still working through some technical challenges to ensure all the stats are available. So I think, yes, okay, I've worked with enough websites in my time to know that there can be teething problems, but I will bring it back to Chloe's initial point, and that is, this is the start of a brand new era. We kind of shouldn't be at this point, at this start of a brand new era. I think I don't even think that's up for debate. And I kind of think Karen alluded to it a little bit last week, all that information and the whole kind of setup that goes with things just needs to be better. You can't, I think I said to you, Chloe, we can't be in a position where we can complain about our sport not getting coverage when actually the sort of basic provision to allow people to write about it is not there. Because it's a tough sport to write about, Chloe, right? You and I have written about lots of different sports. It is tough. There's lots of information. Like, you kind of need to separate different parts of the game.
Totally. And I think the challenge is you've got 7 people doing 7 different jobs.
Yeah.
So to explain someone's job, why that's different to somebody else's, I think is so important. And your passion is tennis stats. My passion is basketball stats. I love the NBA stats and the WNBA stats as well.
Yeah.
And I want to make this point because this is something the league should, in my opinion, be considering and thinking about really carefully. In the women's sport landscape right now, basketball, we saw that recent report from Deloitte that came out, is overtaking football. And at the spearheading that right now is this amazing basketball player called Caitlin Clark. Caitlin Clark, we knew that she was going to be a big deal because she was breaking university basketball stats. She was breaking records, and there was data going back years and years and years and years to tell us, to signpost to us, this is going to be a phenom. This is someone that is going to change the game. And that brought brands in, it brought attention. It's like all this audience came to see who this person is that people are saying is the next LeBron of women's basketball. And she's brought people with her because that it's not just a one-person band. We've got Angel Reese, Cameron Brink, lots of other female basketball. But that journey starts based on numbers, and it's a language people understand, even if they don't necessarily appreciate your sport. I know what a top point scorer is. That's going to be like, okay, this person's probably quite good. So that is what we're missing. And that comes back to the point about archive as well, like why it's important that we have historic data as well. So anyway, I put that there. And I want to also, while we're still off the court, the other thing that felt same, but different is the broadcast. So excellent. Love that it's available for everybody to watch. But I'll be honest, I was expecting another step up if we're in professionalization era in the quality of the broadcast. So I was watching Lightning and Thunder, scoreboard dropped out. The Dragons game, the mics were off and it was really patchy in parts. Now there are lots, and Paul, you are very always sensible with this and say, look, it's harder than people realize. Got it. But could we have looked at this? Could we have figured it out? Plus point, I thought the new commentators that have come in, I'm such a fan. Nia Jones is brilliant. And I props to Lucy Goodman, who has stepped in, and I thought has done a cracking job as well. Like, just that seamlessly transitions into this lead commentary role. Brought in Kerry Armand. I thought they did a great job with the Leeds game. So, again,
stream numbers are good as well. Chloe. Like we have to balance this out. Like, I tallied it up just before we started. We're at 90,000 streams. That's just on the Sky Sports games. We don't have the information available to us on the BBC game. Maybe that's something we'll look into going forward. But I think, given there were 3 games on Sky, started on Friday night, and we're recording here on a Tuesday, I think 90,000 views tells us that there is an audience there. We can get into translating that to people in arenas in due course. But, at the very least, that, nearly 100,000 people deserve, is a good standard of what they're watching.
What was your impression of it, Claire? What did you think?
Yeah, I think, again, I love the fact that you've mentioned the commentators. I thought quality, really, really quality. So that was, I think that gave everyone that boost, refresh. I love that they both kind of brought their characters to the commentary as well. And then I thought that there is such a difference in the visuals. The BBC broadcast I thought was very good, Pulse versus Forest. But you're right, that kind of visual then looked very different to Lightnin versus Thunder. I think, again, it goes back to perhaps my point previously, where some things still feel quite reactive. Because originally it was our understanding that we actually weren't going to have too many games streamed. A couple of weeks down the line, we now have all the games streamed. So how do you prepare for that? How do we know it's actually going to be running seamlessly when decisions seem to be being made quite last minute, or we seem to be having these extra views, which none of us want to complain about at all. But we have umbrellaed this Super League 2.0 as professional, and that's what, unfortunately, people are going to keep coming back to this season in particular, around, well, is this professional? Would you consider this professional? And at the moment, again, I'm sure everyone's working as hard as they can behind the scenes. However, like I say, there's just some certain things that feel a little bit reactive rather than proactively preparing for what's to come this season.
I think that's very well put. That's very astutely put. I like that. And it's true. Look, if they're gonna, and I really liked your point earlier, actually, Claire. If we're going to hold the players to a professional standard, I think the thing that we'd like to see coming out of round one is that everyone else sort of lifts themselves up to that sort of standard too. And look, we'll track this as we go on. We'll give the benefit of the doubt. It's round one, teething problems. We know the website, as you said, Paul, which is great that we got an email response. They're working on it, but let's see how it goes.
I think one other thing as well, because we're not just here to be negative. I thought the crowds were good as well. I know the move to arenas is something that Karen spoke so eloquently about. Little plug here: if you haven't listened to our full episode with Karen Gregg, it's a fascinating listen. It was an hour long, probably could have been 3 hours long. In truth, lots to say about lots of different things. But I thought Karen's point about being able to kind of pivot when the sport needs to, and it's like let's keep a track on how many people are coming to these games. Are we ready to go to huge arenas? And I think if we're honest, we saw, I think it was 1,300 at Rhinos, who were very good at putting that information out. At Pulse, I wrote the report for their website. There was 2,700 there at the Copper Box. The entire bottom part of the arena was a sellout, which was really, really good. Lightnin Thunder, I think, was upwards of 4,000, if I'm right.
I think so. Yeah.
I think I saw a number floating around. And again, if we are going to hold everything to account this year, and as much as we kind of would love to be here, already 5, 6, 7 years down the line, we're not. We're at the start. Then let's see the numbers. Let's know how many people are turning up. Karen said this last week. We shouldn't be kind of embarrassed to take a step back or a standstill moment. And if we're only averaging sort of 1,200, then okay, that's fine. That's what we're working with, and let's take our time to grow it. So I thought crowds were good. Like any sport, there's always that passion, that enthusiasm in week one. Can we sustain them into round 2, round 3, round 4, round 5. But yeah, I have to say, I thought attendances on the face of it looked really good, and it'll be interesting to see if the sport can kind of keep that going.
Absolutely. Should we get to the netball then?
Yeah, now let's get to the netball.
Is it me again? And me to start?
You start. We're gonna go and flip flop between 4 games. Chloe, you get one, I'll take one, and Claire will get you to give your take on the games as we go, because otherwise me and Chloe will just talk forever. That's what we discovered in episode 2.
Oh, we'll talk forever. I'll listen.
You did keep to your time limits. Yeah, that's true.
I did. I was so good. I was so. Claire, is it actually, before we get started, is there any points that you really want to make about these games? So, like, maybe you can throw it to you a bit earlier, or.
I've just made like little general notes from each and
Okay.
what I thought just from some teams. I've got some like 1 or 2 names I think just to like mention, but yeah, just quite general really. But yeah, I've made little points on each.
Okay. Amazing. Okay, that's great. All right, then I will. I'll kick us off. Right. So game number 1 that we're going to be looking at is Birmingham Panthers Leeds Rhinos. Rhinos took that win, and in the end, quite comprehensively, I think. I felt, certainly. Coming into it, I think it was going to be a tall order for Panthers, who had 2 significant outs coming into the fixture. Gabby Sinclair, still haven't seen her yet. She was not available. And Jess Shaw. So we know who is a supplier of ball to Ziggy Berger. So for me, I was expecting Panthers front end to be challenged, like it's a chink in the armour there. And then we had Chloe Essam coming in and Clara Miles coming in to replace them. Rhinos all fit and healthy, so just as they were. I think both had a point to prove coming into the game. Panthers had a tough Super Cup. I think, Paul, you had pointed out that they lost all their games, but not by much, and obviously had 2 outs at the time. Gabby Coffey wasn't available then. She was now. And then obviously Rhinos had that amazing Super Cup run. So they wanted to obviously show everybody that wasn't a fluke. And they kind of did, to be quite honest. I think for me, one of the things that struck me about the game again was Rhinos' intelligence to take out a shooter. And that's what they did. They took out Berger. They blunted her as a weapon. And it exposed Betsy Creek, that then forced the hand of Joe Tripp. She took Berger off, put Betsy back at goal shooter, put Clara Miles on. But Panthers went from leading at half-time to then having everything overturned. I think because, again, that front end was perhaps not running so well. Down the other end, Joyce Mavula, oh my word, was absolutely unreal. I thought she showed everybody that she is a seasoned campaigner and can deliver. Any concerns about her for having years been a target under a post in terms of super shot, unreal. She was putting them up, putting them in, no problems. There was one she took beautifully literally on the tip of the circle edge, thought about it, and then put it in. And that was the kind of confidence that we saw in Rhinos, I think in the Super Cup, and we saw it again in the course of round 1. I think for Panthers, the other thing that I thought was curious was Jazz Brown was struggling a little bit with Joyce. We could see that. Gabby Coffey, I think, was doing the job of too many people. So defensively, they weren't as tight as perhaps I was expecting, given the names. But look, I think that was just a battle that Joyce won that day. Claire, what do you think? Share with us your wisdom.
So yeah, I feel Panthers for me came out fighting. You know, I actually thought for the first quarter in particular, their attacking end pleasantly surprised me, and I thought they were more clinical than Leeds Rhinos down that attacking end. I thought they felt more connected in that first quarter. Have to give a shout out to Ruth Hughes, who I think I felt really pleased for her come in from a season where she kind of just had a couple of minutes here and there. And as you say, Jess Shaw ruled out. It's a huge loss for Panthers. I thought she took on that role really, really well. And to see her growth in her game, I was really, really chuffed for Ruth. I think then things came a bit unstuck where Leeds Rhinos very much learnt to take Ziggy out of the game. whilst that was going on down the other end, you've got Mavula growing and growing in confidence. And the minute she got her flow on that super short, in the super shot, that for me was kind of game over. I thought Mavula was initially maybe a bit hesitant and kind of stuck to the ones, and that kept Leeds Rhinos always in touch and distance. But then that second half, I thought Rhinos kind of felt very much connected. Defence grew in confidence to win ball, and then Mavula to finish basically wherever she touched the ball. That's going to give your team a massive boost. I think what was interesting for me is maybe how Panthers are currently adapting to not having Jo Tripp on court with that defensive unit. Last year, she was a massive influence. She's a massive presence, and she was kind of, one of the leads for turnovers, deflections, etc. So I think that's going to be a huge adjustment then for Jo Tripp to be purely bench side, and I think we're waiting maybe. I think Coffey has great potential to take that lead. She really kind of came on, had impact and turned ball at crucial times, but we don't maybe have that connection yet as much as what they had last year defensively.
I think that's I love the point that you make there about Jo, because I think watching from the side and then watching from the back of the court is also two very different viewpoints. So for her to read the game, it looks very different. And, she is a 2-time NSL Coach of the Year, so we'll back her. But yeah, I think that you're right, that's certainly a challenge, and it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. I think the other notable thing worth mentioning before we wrap up this game is our first suspension. Jiva Mentor did send Gabby Marshall to the ground, and actually I'm not sure how she was allowed to still play, if I'm going to be honest. We'll trust the medical decision that was made, but I have my eyebrows very raised at that, because that just didn't look right to me. It was a chunky hit. Gabby hit her head, I think, and she landed on the floor. Jiva had been, as we said, instrumental in taking Ziggy out, and it wasn't the only suspension we had actually in this round. But what did you think of that, Claire, when you saw it?
Yeah, I think for me, going forward, if play is deemed dangerous enough to be sent off, and especially if it's got anything to do with a head injury, that player has to be checked. There is no question about it. I feel so strongly kind of about the head injuries and the lasting impact. Often as well with head injuries, the delayed impact. So again, I just want to see our athletes and just being taken care of. And as I say, if it's severe enough for an instant send off, a player has to be checked over.
I think that's fair.
Yeah.
I should say I didn't like the challenge for taking her out. What I liked was it showed the physicality of the sport. While I was at Sky, what I was very big on was I was trying to illustrate kind of the wider kind of journalistic community, if you like. There's so much more to this sport than you actually realise. It's super physical, it's super intense. I kind of think in this era, and obviously my job is content, when you see things like that, I think that helps illustrate the kind of level of athlete that is happening. Obviously, don't endorse the challenge. I wasn't trying to say that in any way, shape or form. I feel like I should just clear that up very, very quickly. I'm going to move it on. I'm going to move on to Dragons and Mavericks, which was a game I watched on Friday evening. Both teams at full strength. Nothing sort of too much to concern themselves. Both kind of picked what you would imagine in their strongest sevens. And I think, actually, it was a super competitive game. There was nothing in it, really, until Vicky Oyasola's injury. Now, as it stands, we haven't heard on quite how bad that injury is. It didn't look good. It wasn't an impact injury. She was kind of on her own. Looked like she landed awkwardly. So we'll obviously wait to hear that. And obviously our thoughts are with Vicky, who's such an incredible player when she's fit and when she's on her game. And that'll be something that Mavs have to deal with. And it obviously brings up the question of squad depth that I think we've spoken about already a few times, and we're going to see that. I think from a game point of view, it felt like once Mavs were able to get a handle on kind of a fairly predictable Dragons attack, they were just able to do enough to pull away down the stretch, and in the end won it 65-56. So it was sort of probably the closest game of the weekend, and I think that bore out for nearly three quarters. It was just at that little bit towards the end where maybe Mavs just had a little bit more of an attacking threat. Claire, I don't know what you think. I thought it was really, really close. It was just that little bit more, and I'd raised in the preview that I felt how the Dragons attack end evolves and has a plan B or a plan C is going to be key to what they do this season.
Yeah, absolutely. I really felt for Dragons. I might be bringing some personal biases into this, but
You're allowed.
I feel like for this game it's okay. But yeah, I thought for three quarters, even though it was tight, Dragons for me looked more in control. I absolutely thought it was a game of kind of the defence end. Lots of ball hungry defenders, which was always great to see. I think, Dragons would have been delighted that it was home for them, that fortress. We want it. We have always wanted people to come and feel uncomfortable, and the crowd most certainly does that. So they 100% would have had the crowd behind them, which I think, again, really saw in their game for three quarters of the time. It's so difficult, I think, when an opposition has such a significant injury like they did. I think then that mental aspect of the game, as far as Mavericks were concerned, that's an additional 1%er where when you see a teammate of yours go down that heavily, you feel every inch of your body for them. And it's horrible to be in amongst those conversations, but the conversations tend to be around, right, girls, we've got to play for Vicky. We've got to come out now. We've got to finish this game. We've got to put this game to bed. To talk. Really hard to play against that because, as I say, it's that step up in mentality that they're now playing for, and unfortunately, then it just didn't go Dragons' way, and I think Dragons seemed to stop winning as much ball as what they had done throughout the game, and I think that's where they just became unstuck in that last quarter.
Yeah, word on Raz Kwasi, who had a really good Super Cup, I thought, and she played well again, and that goalkeeper position is very much up for grabs as far as the Roses are concerned. I know, Chloe, you're a fan, and Raz, I thought was really good. She really stepped up.
Yeah.
My turn now, isn't it? Pulse Forest, because I was at this.
Yeah, you go again. We'll allow you a second run.
Yeah, I kind of put these in I put these in order of when the games took place, not thinking about why it should go backwards and forwards, which would have been a more sensible approach. But never mind, we're here now. So yeah, again, Pulse Forest. I was really looking forward to this because I think both teams on paper have got super strong squads. So in the end, I was a little bit disappointed because it kind of blew out early. I spoke to Sandbird after. She felt her team were kind of day one nerves, which I think were probably all understandable for everybody. There was a good crowd, a very excitable crowd in there as well. But I think as soon as Pulse got a handle on it, and I would say it was as early as maybe the first 4 or 5 minutes, like they went 3 or 4-1 down, but then very quickly managed to turn the game on its head. And then were kind of just in control of it, I think is, we use that word a lot in netball, but they really were, like I'd say from as early as midway through the first quarter. At half time, they were able to bring on young Gracie Smith, who didn't look overawed in any way, shape or form. She has got incredible arms for a 16-year-old. Like her arms went on forever, it felt like. And obviously Sophie Kelly came on, and there was also a full final quarter for Darcy Everett. Forest, I feel like, looks so good at Super Cup, and I know it was a very different type of netball, but they kind of, they looked a bit lost early. I kind of felt maybe they would have benefited from the presence of Iona Christian a little bit earlier than she came on, but obviously I'm assuming that she's still managing her return, having very recently had a baby. It's incredible to see her out there in the first instance. But there did seem a little bit more cohesion when she came onto the court, but by kind of this stage, the game had kind of already run away. Super shot wise, I was interested to see Cole Breet take on a little bit of the lion's share early for Pulse. Rolling was rolling as we would expect. And Chloe, you
say that after round one.
Yeah, no, Chloe, you said this though, but I do think how the super shot plays out in kind of these longer games is going to be interesting, because almost Forest kind of didn't really have much choice, but as soon as we got to 5 minutes, because the game was beginning to blow out a bit, kind of had no choice but to try and chase it a little bit. And I do think that'll be a bit of a learning period for the teams as to kind of what you do. Do you chase it, or do you just try and stick to your tasks, stick to your structures, and kind of just try and get yourself back into the game that way? And I think when you force it, Claire, to your point, very much a theme of the show, like there's a different type of mental pressure when you kind of have to make it. And in stark contrast, Nicole Breet, Liv Sheen, who is incredible under the post as always at the moment, they were able to just play with a little bit more freedom and kind of sink their shots from range with just a little bit more regularity. So super positive for Pulse, I think. I think Forest will come away and hopefully look to their first home game this weekend and kind of be a bit of a rallying of the troops, because it maybe felt like a bit of a welcome to Super League moment for them. I don't know what your thoughts are there.
Yeah, no, Pulse for me, I think they're a little bit scary for me this season. I think we saw just after round one how much depth they've got. I thought for me, Nicole Breet probably robbed of Pom, in my opinion. I just thought how she controlled that attacking end. She then also had nerves of steel to take the twos and was slotting them quite comfortably. Yeah. She's just going to grow and grow, I believe. And then, for example, if she has an off day, oh my word, you've got Sophie Kelly, who we know is a bit of a long bomb queen, and again is a bit of another calm, as you like. And Liv is just growing and growing every game that we see her. So I think attacking wise, Pulse look very strong. And then their defence now have been playing together for several years, and they just love turning ball, don't they? You know, if it's not Fumi, it's Everett. And then of course we had an introduction of her sister Darcy Everett, who had a hand, I think, on every single phase as soon as she came on. And you talk about kind of the length of these young ones' limbs. Gracie Smith, Darcy Everett, it's just limb after limb after limb, you know. I certainly didn't have limbs like that when I was 16. So I just think that, you know, Pulse are definitely kind of gunning for that final. And they certainly kind of showed why after round one. So I think they're an early call for finalists for me. But I thought, again, Nottingham started really, really well, and I thought they did really well to stay in touching distance up until kind of half time, maybe midway through the third quarter. I really like what Chelsea's done in terms of being smart around connections. You know, the connection between Pavlin and Pekova I thought was outstanding. They're working really, really well together. Same again, kind of with Bree down that attacking end, and Ria. So I think relating that then to Super Cup, I think it's there in small doses, and it's there obviously for a half of a game. You know, now putting all together for them, will be searching for more of that consistency for that 60 minutes.
I thought maybe Zara Everett was a bit robbed of Pom as well. Can I say that? I thought she was outstanding.
And I think that speaks to the performance, though, right? There were several players. Scholes got broadcaster or the official player of the match. Zara got the sponsors player of the match. I'm with you, Claire. I thought Nicole Breit's a brilliant playmaker. Like, she's a little bit unpredictable at times, but when she's on song, and I thought she was on song very, very early, and I kind of think she was a little bit robbed. But I think that speaks to the standard and the level of performance that, you know, we probably all could pick out 2 or 3 players who are outstanding, and we kind of ignore Fumi doing what Fumi does and Liv doing what she does. Like, you kind of take it for granted, like 8 or 9 out of 10 almost every week.
But do you think that it is also maybe the weakness of the opposition as well? Just to be devil's advocate.
I said that. I kind of felt I was a little bit disappointed by Forest. Maybe unfairly, like you said, Claire. They are just putting all these different connections together. I like the look of their squad. I really do, and I have high hopes for it to be a really competitive, very, very close game. So maybe I'm skewed in my own head, like on that part. But I think they will. I think they'll come good. I just think Pulse. I think they want to work on their attack end. Like, Sam's made no secret of that, because their defence has been their identity. And obviously there was a lot to take from game 1. And obviously we go to game 2. We'll get to this later on, but Lightnin will be a very different test for them away this weekend against like Shadeen and Alice Harvey and Beth Cobden, which frankly scares the living daylights out of me. Just me, to be honest. Not.
Well, that's probably quite a nice little transition to the last game of the round.
I'll tee them up for you, Chloe.
Love that. It was like, we've been doing this for years, Paul.
Seamless, guys.
Oh, Lightning versus Thunder. So this one was obviously earmarked as a big one, given that it was these two teams. They were the 2024 final. But we add a big old asterisk next to it, because this is a Thunder side without much. We've said with Karen, 40% of its intended starting 10. So I think the mission was always going to be for Thunder, can they stay in it? And they gave it a really good go. I think Elmarie van der Berg, oh my gosh, the way she was putting up the super shots really kept Thunder in it up until the third quarter in earnest. And then they had a massive blowout in the fourth. I think it was like 18-7 to Loughborough Lightning, which probably just explains, to me, it points to the fact that Lightning really had a grip on it pretty early on. It was just a super shot kind of keeping Thunder in, and their general tenacity across the court, given what they were working with. But I think Lucy Herdman came on at goal attack quite early doors, and was citing Elmarie really early, doing her best. But I think her plus India Massa, their inexperience and lack of connection maybe with that Thunder side kind of got exposed by the end against some defending veterans. Shadeen was epic in disrupting Thunder right from the get-go, and then and Alice Harvey I thought was a menace, and then Jodie Gibson came on, and Beth Cobden was there the whole time. So like Lightning, I think, were classy there. They were very physical, and it was a physical game. And we had a suspension here from Taylor McKevitt, completely took the legs out of Nat Panagari. That was very dangerous, I think, like a bowling ball to a bowling pin. And that, I think, was hard for Karen Gregg to deal with, because, and we can talk about whether or not we think the changes were unsettling. I think, to me, it looked like that was very deliberate from Karen to try and get a grip on the game. And I don't think it was a weakness for her to make the changes. I think that's probably an approach we're going to see from her, like to make the 10 rotate round, and she has to because of injury, etc., etc. But losing someone early to a suspension hurts, and it really hurts the options that you're able to play out. When she did settle on putting, I felt, Amy Carter to wing defence and Emma Rayner at centre, that was when Thunder actually started biting back. And there was a moment where I think Lightning were like, oh, hello. And the mid-court battle wasn't necessarily won anymore. But look, it was a chunky game. And by the end, it was 66-52. So was it 66? Yeah, 66-52. Forgive me. I've written it down.
66-52 is correct, Chloe.
It is correct. Good, thank you. So it was the biggest loss of the round. And on our Instagram poll, it was the most impressive, according to our audience on there. Claire, give us your insights. What did you think?
I think this game probably had a bit of everything, didn't it? I think, again, it feels mad saying that 66-52 was the biggest deficit of round one, yet these two were our grand finalists last year, you know, so there's something in that, again, of kind of what happened in the game, and actually kind of what were people seeing that maybe felt that actually that was one of our most entertaining games. I thoroughly enjoyed seeing Lightnin play a rotational circle, very kind of uncharacteristic to what we typically see of them. And again, Lightnin always kind of have an answer for various plays of what they're up against. So I think whilst Sam Wallace is out, I think that gives Lightnin a bit of time to be able to solidify that as an option for them. You kind of think when Wallace is on her return, she will obviously replace the kind of the hold that we're typically used to seeing Lightnin playing with. But how scary is that, knowing that if that's not working, they've got a lovely rotation. Ella Clark on the shot for me was unreal, and again, just another one of these players that I think is just going to grow and grow more comfortable with the distance of the super shot. Thunder, for me, I think just highlighted the power of their pathway. I think you're right, Chloe. I think by the end, you know, unfortunately, inexperience probably got the better of the youngsters coming through. But I actually thought that they came on with a huge amount of maturity to their game, and you can tell kind of how well nurtured they've been throughout that Manchester Thunder pathway. And I am really sad to see kind of just how many injuries we've had before the season's even started. But again, what an opportunity for these youngsters to just kind of grab hold of. And like I say, I thought they started with so much confidence. They didn't seem to kind of look phased. They were really well supported, like you say, with the likes of Amy Carter, who I thought just led fantastically. And so I don't think Thunder, even though they do have a lot kind of ruled out due to injury, I don't think we can rule them out as a whole, because I think these youngsters will grow and grow in confidence. And then you just think about who we've got coming back: Paige Reed, Lois. That's only going to strengthen the team even further. So I think probably not the start that they would have wanted, but given the kind of injuries in their squad so far, I think, you know, I think impressive.
What do you make of it, Paul? Did you watch it?
I did watch it. Yes, I watched it Monday morning because I was at Pulse, and by the time I got home, I'd been at my daughter's netball match earlier in the morning as well. It was a bit like, can I just put some normal telly on for a little while?
Netballed out.
a little bit netballed out. Yeah. So I watched it on Monday morning. I kind of think the same. I think my feeling was that, and I think this is probably testament to where Lightnin are at the moment. They obviously are two-time defending champions. They have complete confidence in who they are and what they do. And I feel like they can win fairly impressively, even when they don't have to be at their very, very top, because their B game, if you like, is so reliable, and I kind of think that's what the game showed to me. I think, again, Claire's point, which we spoke to Karen about, that kind of pathway, that identity that Thunder have, it's, you know, it's something that they should be super, super proud of, because, you know, teenagers like Anya Williams just stepping up into a Super League match, you know, she did it last year, but to do it again, like from the off, you know, she's going to be a star at some point, and just this little bit more exposure is going to help her out. And when Lois and when Paige and when Nicola Smith all come back, you know, they'll be there or thereabouts, obviously, right at the top. So I don't think they'll lose any sleep over it. Yes, they'll be disappointed, of course, but I think they'll put it in context. And given their injuries, I think the priority for them at the minute will probably be make sure they're in the top four. And then I think, you know, it's famous for saying in sort of Super Bowl parlance, make sure you're in the tournament at the end of the season, right? Like, I think, you know, whether they finish first or fourth, I think Thunder would fancy their chances. So just to not lose touch is probably their priority.
Yeah.
One last little thing for both of you. And Claire, actually, we haven't asked you how you feel about Super Shot, but there was a talking point that came out of this game where there was some reaction online that was sort of saying, well, actually, the Super Shot's kind of boring. Because there was a couple of moments where it, El Murray, Ella Clark, El Murray, Ella Clark. To me, that speaks of what Karen was alluding to sort of signpost again, like absolutely everybody should try and get to listen to that podcast, was the defence is still trying to work out how to deal with the Super Shot. That's where I thought Zara Everett was monstrous in that Pulse game, because actually I think she really helped the Pulse back to deal with the Super Shot. But there is something there, and I wonder, with the comparison to Super Netball is easy to make, and we have to remember all the caveats, like this is a professional league, they've been playing it for a while, they are the world's best players, they have unlimited imports, etc., etc. But to me, in SSN, there is a greater risk reward with the Super Shot. It's riskier because it's harder to get in the Super Shot position in the first place, and then it's risky because you can't guarantee the rebound. So, you know, the reward is bigger, and often the games are closer before the period starts. Here, I just thought it was really curious that already by round one, there were some folks being like, this is boring. What do you make of it, Claire?
You just can't win, can you? And I mean, you know, I think some people you're just never going to please. And I think as athletes, you know, we come to that conclusion ourselves. And I think I wasn't a player that kind of liked to go on Twitter after games, etc. I just didn't like to see it. I think the Super Shot for me, I think it's really hard to give an opinion after kind of round one. It's something that I think when I initially heard it, I thought, oh no, there's just too much change. There's you know, like I say, franchises, squad sizes, no training partners, we're professional. Now we've got a Super Shot. There just felt as if there was maybe kind of the whole kitchen sink thrown at Netball 2.0. So that was kind of my initial, like, oh, I'm not really sure. And then I kind of questioned myself on, you know, humans, we don't like change. We typically don't like change. And we are more likely to kind of criticise change rather than try and understand it. And that's where I'm at the moment. I don't have good enough knowledge in terms of the tactics behind the Super Shot. You know, I personally could never shoot anyway. I always lose killer. But again, if I was signed in that squad as a shooter, I'd be thinking, oh my goodness, the pressure that gets put on you. How do you then all of a sudden start training to be a good super shotter? How do you replicate that pressure in a game, in training? And these are things that, again, coaches won't know the answers to this either. And so I think probably until we start getting kind of to midway and we start seeing clear tactics, we start hearing from coaches of where they're looking, who they're drawing inspiration from, I think it's going to be really hard to kind of judge whether the Super Shot has had a good impact on our league or not. I like that after round one, it has meant that the scores at half time have been significantly closer to perhaps what we're used to. And again, I saw the reference to it feeling a bit boring, but I think what a skill. Not everyone would be able to do that under that amount of pressure. And again, this is where I think you can't really win, because ultimately fans we're pleading for tighter performances, closer results, etc. That is what's happening for at least 3/4 of the game after round one. So I think as we start to develop more understanding of the tactics around kind of how we defend a Super Shot, how we are taking the Super Shots, I think that's when we're probably in a better position to see how it is kind of having that influence on our game.
I'm interested to see how it evolves, Chloe. You like me, you cover a lot of basketball. There's a school of thought in the States at the moment that the NBA is really boring because everyone's shooting from 3-point range. You give elite sports people the chance to practice something over and over again, they're going to get good at it. That's why we watch it. Like, so I kind of think that boring argument falls down a little bit for me, because I can sit and watch Steph Curry shoot threes all night long. I often do as part of my job. To be fair, so yeah, I will be interested to see how it evolves. I think the tactical nature. We'll reference what we said earlier. I think the statistical side of it as well, as we start to see maybe who's shooting well, who's better at it, who can respond to it well. And I think in the Super Cup in particular, it was very evident that players were trying to get to certain positions because that's where they felt comfortable. And as you both said, like teams are going to start to defend that in a better way. So I think the tactical nature of it is what will make it more interesting. I think for now, like everyone feels like they're finding their feet. I didn't find it boring.
Definitely. Yeah, and I think I love that point. It's now their requirement. It's their job. They have to be good at a super shot. And again, I'm sure if they started missing super shots consistently, people would have something to say about it, and they wouldn't kind of hold back on social media. So I'd like to see some kind of more celebration in terms of our super shotters being implemented. This probably may be a bit controversial. I think I've probably got a stronger feeling on the tactical timeouts. I'm not sure I'm a fan.
That's interesting, actually. There was only one at the Pulse game. I can't remember seeing them, which I think tells me that they just kind of melted into the coverage. I can't actually recall remembering them.
Yeah, and again, it's something that I'd be interested to hear from the players in terms of how they feel about the tactical timeout. I think for me, again, just thinking back to when I was playing, there was something about enjoying that skill of problem solving. So having to notice the runs and what we were doing as a squad to stop the runs. So, in Wales squad, we tend to have maybe a word that would kind of signal that's been 3 runs in a row. That signals a change of play or a specific play in order to stop the run. And I thought that skill of being able to problem solve, notice the momentum shift, and then being able to kind of get yourselves out of there, I think that's a really, really important skill to keep as a netballer. I'm not sure if I kind of like that idea of stopping play, taking time, given instruction. It's incredibly important, and it can change momentum back the other way. But I'm not sure that I kind of enjoy that stopping. I think I probably am more opinionated about that over the super shot at the moment.
That's really interesting. Claire, you are so interesting. I've loved your insights already.
Oh, thanks.
Tip for Clare Jones.
She can come back. We'll have Claire again.
Thank you.
Round 1 then. Round 1 in the books. We'll jump into round 2 shortly. But before that, Chloe and I sat down for the latest Unlocked interview, which are deep dives, hopefully, with players, coaches and officials. For next up after Karen is Sam Bird. So here's a little taste of Sam on the challenge of being a CEO and a head coach, and also taking on an entirely new region, which was part of Pulse's off-season. So super exciting to bring you the latest instalment of Unlocked, and it's London Pulse CEO and head coach, England selector, former Mavericks and Stars coach, current Turnford Prem coach, netball mum, former England international. Sam, have I missed anything off of that list? Sam Bird.
I feel like I should say dutiful wife, but that's probably, I'm terrible at that role. So no, I think that's correct, Paul.
Listen, we're absolutely delighted to have you. I've obviously spoken to you a few times in my role with Pulse, but you've got such an interesting backstory, and Pulse are a team who have been knocking on the door for a while, as we've discussed for a while. So we're looking forward to getting into things. And before we get going, can I just kind of ask you a little bit about round 1, a pleasing performance and a good win over Forest, as we discussed afterwards.
Yeah, I think because Forest are obviously a really exciting new team in the league, and we didn't meet them at Super Cup. It was a little bit of an unknown for us, so it was a really good first test for us. Great to be at home with a really good crowd, but we really weren't sure what we would find against Forest. And I think it's well known they've got some very good individuals in their squad. So we weren't taking that fixture lightly, but I'm actually really pleased with how that went. Yeah, so a really good crowd for our first game. A few London Pulse people coming back to us, sort of Chelsea obviously coming back to our old club, having been a fantastic player for us. Um, I think our players were quite nervous in the first sort of 5 minutes. I think we were a bit jittery and made a few errors, and Forest actually went ahead. But I think after we settled down and the players just started to remember how good their connections are, and really just started to enjoy themselves. I think our sort of style and brand came through and had a particularly strong second half, which was really what we were aiming to do, sort of grind Forest down a little bit in the first half of the game and then try and take off, which in fact played out that way.
There's a sense, Sam, you cleared that hurdle as a coach, a nice strong win, as we've just said. But you also cleared a hurdle as a CEO of a club that just survived a tender process, and you crossed that line as well with that opening round fixture. Can you tell us a little bit more about the kind of two hats that you wear? I know it's not the first time in your career that you've worn two hats at the same time, but perhaps a little bit about the demands of it professionally and personally.
Yeah, I mean it is a lot. But I think I'm someone that just thrives on um, taking on challenges. I've learned over the last maybe couple of years to divide my day up. So I sort of have a business sort of diary, if you like, where I'll concentrate on the running of the business, running of the club, pretty much through the day till about 3 o'clock. And then my attention will turn to performance matters, things not just related to the first team, but I'm very across supporting the next gen team and the 19s and the 17s and indeed the other pathway. So I try and divide my time up so I'm clear about what which hat I've got on at which time. It's not always easy because some people that I'm working with only work in the evening, so I have to sort of flip between those things. But sort of Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, I'm out every evening training, so I try to split it up. Um, I really enjoy doing both things. The running the business is a challenge at the moment. It's sort of be careful what you wish for, isn't it? So we were really keen on putting in a really strong bid under the tender process, and the staff we had did a really great job in making a strong application. I think we ended up uploading something like 150 policies and documents, Chloe. So and then showing a lot of videos and trying to really get across what our philosophy is about changing young women's, girls and lives in London and across the southeast. So it was quite an exhausting process of itself. But we were delighted to be given a place in the new landscape. But with that privilege comes a lot of work as well, and there certainly is a lot of work that's been done and a lot of work to go, definitely.
How did you, Sam? How did you kind of balance that? Like Karen spoke a little bit about it when we spoke to her, Karen Gregg, about kind of having to kind of negotiate the very real fact that, as confident as some teams might be that their bid was good, the decision was very much out of your hands. So, like, how did you balance that with a team that was obviously competing at the very highest level? And we're talking about sort of getting into the semi-final stages of last year's Super League as well.
How did I manage it? Probably not as well as I would like to have done. Um, and I think sometimes it's getting the balance right with being just honest with the players and staff as well. So my natural position is to take everything on myself and let everybody else not have that pressure of, gosh, what if we don't even get an offer? That means I'm no longer employing these people. What does it mean for the players? Where are they all going to go? And I think there became a moment in that process where I was probably on one of my low days, and I just sort of shared with everyone, like, goodness, that all these things could happen. And actually, they all just then rallied round. So I think I learned that it's actually quite a good thing to let people know how hard it is. And how, I mean, it's even quite emotional thinking about it, but the staff and the players are so invested in the club as well that it sort of just then galvanised me that, look, we are doing the right thing. Let's be optimistic about our prospects of winning this, and then when we win a place in the new league, we really need to drive it and make sure it succeeds, because that's the pressure now. The pressure now is to do everything we can as a club to try and make this league succeed and be successful for years to come, and that's not an easy prospect either.
Yeah, I wanted to pick you up on that a little bit, Sam, because we actually saw a Deloitte report that came out that sort of said that elite women's sport is predicted to exceed 1.8 billion globally in 2025. And there's basketball actually predicted to surpass football, probably from over in the US, driving that. But where do you see netball in that landscape? Is it set up to compete, do you think, with the process that you've just been through and the 10 years that are ahead?
I think the jury's still out, Chloe. I think what we do know is that people that have a touch point with our sport, on the whole, fall in love with it. So anybody that's got a connection, whether they're a dad, a player, a sibling, a partner, most people, once they see netball played at a strong level like this, will buy into it. The bigger challenge still remains that we're predominantly a female sport. Female sport is the bigger part of the sport, the female side of netball over male. And we're having to compete in a space with other women's sports, but who have the backing of being connected to a male platform. And I think we're in a unique space with that, and that is very challenging. And whilst it can be an asset, it can also be something that hampers our progress as well, because if I had a pound for every time I've spoken to men in businesses who simply do not know what netball is, and women for that fact, or women that might have played netball in the rain when they were 10 and have these dreadful memories of them, and now they're really successful in the corporate world, but don't have any notion of, oh, well, this is really great, we'd really like to back you. So there's a lot of barriers still to get over. But I think what I always come back to is that netball for me is a really strong product. It's a really strong game. It's a game people love to play. It's got teamship. It's got competitiveness. It's got the personalities. And the challenge is rolling this out to your average couple of guys that might be talking about sport in the pub, that are talking about netball as well as talking about football or rugby, and that's the challenge, but it's difficult.
So the wheel keeps turning, and the next round of action offers, I think, 4 more pretty enticing games. Starts on Friday, 2 matches on at the same time. Very quickly, you two, watch one, stay away from the other one, or watch one and stay across the other one on a second screen? There was a bit of social media debate on Friday evening. Where did you stand, Claire?
So, controversially, I don't mind knowing scores before I watch it. So, I'm a one watch at a time. I just think netball's so quick. If I had 2 screens, I would definitely get confused between games.
That's fair.
So yeah, I'm a watcher, and if I know the score of the other one, then so be it. I'm okay with that.
Chloe?
Double screens. I'm like, it's like HQ here, like bang, bang, put the rugby on over there. Let's have a feast.
Give me all of it. Give me all of it.
Inject it. But my focus is primarily on the game that I think to me will be the most interesting, and then I have the other one in the background in case something ticks off over there. But I'll be honest, like 80% of my attention is on the one that is probably on my laptop, and the other one is on the TV.
Okay, so Friday night we've got Nottingham Forest against the Dragons. Forest first home game, Motorpoint Arena. Also on Friday night, Panthers Thunder. All four of those teams actually on Friday night without a win. So with that's fairly interesting. Stats, you see, can always make a story out of stats.
Yeah.
And then on Sunday we've got Lightnin against Pulse, which is obviously a huge game. 2 round 1 winners, repeated last year's semi-final, the grand final the year before that. Perhaps the 2 more impressive teams from opening round as well. I think we get to see face off. And then Mavericks versus Rhinos as well. We'll kind of touch on them all in a second. But as part of this whole 2.0 business and transparency, we obviously are quite keen to find out about injuries. And I think we've had a couple of questions actually on that, Chloe, as well. And I think maybe the teams being that little bit more transparent about their squads, whether it's 24 hours, 48 hours earlier, is going to be important. But Claire, I know you kind of got some feelings on kind of the size of the squads as well. Like 10 always felt like a stretch. I think most people already agreed on that. And we're kind of seeing that already, aren't we?
I think so, yeah. I think this relates to a kind of a little bit of upset that I have around kind of how many injuries we're seeing before the season's even started. Again, it could be for so many reasons, so many factors. You can't not feel that it's a bit coincidental that we've had an increase in the international season. We've kind of sliced the teams down. We've increased our training to kind of more of a professional level, and we're seeing niggles, we're seeing injuries. I would have loved, I think, just for this season, whilst we're kind of going through those teething problems, whilst we're finding our way as players, as coaches, etc., to have just kept that security of 15 players and have kind of your 12 plus 3 training partners. It makes such a difference in training, in my personal opinion, because when you are carrying niggles, when you've got a squad of 15 there, you can share the load so much easily than when you've just got your 10, I imagine. I can imagine that 10 probably feels a little bit lonely compared to kind of that extra 5 bodies that you're used to having. With 10, you can't even play against one another. So yeah, I think that I'm a little bit kind of feel a little bit upset about, in terms of then it would also mean so many players included that perhaps didn't have a contract and deserve to have a contract this year. You look at some of the Scottish players, some of the girls from Bath, etc., who have lost franchises. It had the opportunity to try and include more players that were still so deserving of being a part of Netball 2.0 this year. I also think we would have seen less niggles, less injuries if we had kind of looked after our girls a little bit more and had more bigger squad sizes.
Yeah, to add to that, Karen literally said this. She said, with 10 players, you can't barely do a half court. Yeah. So it is bearing out, as you say, Claire, it is interesting to see how everyone feels about it. But it seems like the consensus at the moment, Paul, is that 10 is not enough.
I think, I watched the Next Gen game at Pulse at the weekend as well. And that, whilst a great idea, it kind of feels like it's between two different things, because if I look at the Pulse squad in particular, there's obviously quite a big bunch of sort of talented young players. And then like Jada Autumn, Hannah Passmore were both in that team, and both are experienced heads. And obviously those two, in theory, fit the remit, you're saying, Claire, of like a training partner. Like they're almost that perfect additional body. And I get that's what Next Gen's supposed to do, but equally they've got a league season of their own that they kind of need to be playing in and build their connections and all those sorts of things. So we'll kind of get into Next Gen maybe a bit further down the line. But it was an interesting watch, I'll say that. And I think, in theory, using your next gen squad as your kind of training partners makes sense. But I think the reality of that is, it's maybe from a training point of view, some teams have been able to do it better than others. That's just, I don't know that to be fact at the moment, but that's how it feels.
No, I agree with you. I like the idea of it. I like that we're now looking at kind of the depth of kind of our netball players and trying to close the depth. Where I really feel for kind of the more senior players at Next Gen is, yes, they're offloading a wealth of experience to those youngsters who I'm sure are kind of lapping it up. You know, you've got Jade Clark playing in Manchester Thunder Next Gen. Imagine being a youngster in that Next Gen squad, you know. But what about the likes of Johanna Passmores, etc.? How are we nurturing them in terms of their next level? Because to my understanding, the squads aren't linking up at any particular point, so Next Gen won't train with the Super League squad. So then in terms of those senior players within Next Gen, how are we elevating them? How are we making sure that their skill set is kind of being improved and being tested, etc.? Whereas again, the model of having training partners is you would have those players who were kind of on the cusp but maybe needed a bit of fine-tuning, but they were training with the Super League squad. They were still learning, they were still developing, they were learning off kind of the people within the Super League squad. So then they were ready to take the squad. There was less pressure on them. They knew what to expect. They knew the girls. They had the relationships. If there isn't more crossover perhaps in training, I think it would become more and more tough on the girls in the Next Gen to then have to step up as and when into the Super League.
I'll be interested to see how that works out, because actually I spoke to Hannah Passmore afterwards, and she said actually they have been training alongside the Super League team. So she said putting herself up against Hallie and Fumi was like great for her development, but then actually where does she go next, right? Like, obviously, if an injury happens or things like that, then maybe she steps up. But it will be interesting to see if different teams are doing it in different ways. And again, where's that consistency that we're looking for from a league point of view? If one team are doing it one way and another team are doing it another way, I think maybe as we start to speak to coaches and players a little bit more, we'll get a little bit more insight into how those kind of relationships are developing, because I do think it's interesting. Chloe, as well, just to kind of throw it into round two, like, we wouldn't be surprised if we're hearing bumps and bruises and injuries over the next sort of couple of days. Now, as I said, we record on a Tuesday, so it's quite difficult to make sure we've got all that information because assessments haven't been done. But it does look like, reading between the lines, we'll get a few players out.
Yeah, I think that's what we're sort of hearing, Paul, that it's not going to be, there are going to be a couple of outs and maybe still the same outs out again, if you will. So
my Excel document is going to be in turmoil.
Yeah, maybe the league will be in turmoil. I'm not that dramatic. Maybe I'm a bit dramatic, but I'm not that dramatic. But let's sort of make of it what we can with what we know, and sort of step into this. So game one will be, as you said, on Friday at the same time as another, but it's Forest Dragons. That to me is going to be a meaty in sort of clash between what we know a little bit now is a Forest front end with holes in the armour, and what we've seen is a strong Dragons defence end with Leah Middleton and Jackie Newton, Alex Johnson. So that for me is the hinge point of that game. What do you reckon, Claire?
Oh, I'm with you on that. I had kind of noted down Middleton versus Straker. That is going to be a physical battle, which I can't wait to see. And then further up the court, I don't think you can ignore the battle that we've all kind of grown to love, is that kind of Celtic battle between Beth and Dyke and Hannah Layton. And if it's not Hannah Layton, it has the potential to be Niamh Cooper, who Beth is kind of, you know, very well experienced of playing against them both. And it's just a battle that, you know, from seeing it myself and now watching it, it's a battle certainly not to be missed. So they're both going to be pretty bruised from round one. So I think, this week in training is going to be kind of how well they've prepared, but I think again it's that mental game. They're going to Nottingham. We don't know what their crowd is like. We don't know kind of what that percentage is going to be like for Nottingham Forest. So I think Dragons need to be aiming to kind of silence the crowd pretty early on, just like what we kind of saw from round one with Lightnin did to Thunder, which I don't think anyone expected. Never heard the AO arena so quiet. So I think that's got to be kind of up there as part of a strategy. And again, perhaps maybe the battle of the super shot as well between either end.
Yeah.
I think it's grab your popcorn for that one, Paul.
Yeah,
so it does sound like it. You've done a good job of selling it. Panthers Thunder though on at the same time. Anything in particular stand out for you here, Claire, from a key kind of matchups point of view?
I think I predict that whilst Thunder are relatively kind of low on the ground in terms of their main squad, I think teams will be wanting to just take advantage of that as much as possible, take advantage of the kind of inexperience. Now, again, we can't rule Thunder out because, as we've mentioned, their pathway is so solid. They have a firm identity, and they are very well looked after around kind of the experienced players around them. So it is going to require, I think, Panthers to be extremely well disciplined from start to finish. Again, this is how interesting the tactics around the super shot is going to be used. Are they going to kind of just keep ticking over for their ones, or depending on how comfortable they feel, depending on how Thunder are shooting, will they grow in confidence to be able to take their twos? But I think, this does maybe have the potential to blow out. Or can Panthers shock us and kind of take advantage of that inexperience that Thunder currently have?
What do you think, Chloe?
I like the bookends, the battles down on either side, I reckon. Josie, Huckle, Ziggy Burger is always a excellent one. I love that. I think Ziggy Burger, if Jess Shaw is back and she's getting that supply,
that's a good point. Jess could be
just a weapon. Yeah. And Josie knows her very well, so that will be curious. And then down the other end, Jazz Brown gets a bite at the Helmarie Vandenberg apple. Helmarie was just unreal with the super shots. So, will Joe Tripp be looking at that after what Leeds did to Panthers and maybe building more of a strategy around that defence? I'm not sure I necessarily saw it in the first game, so maybe they've done their homework and looked at that one. So I think it's going to be an interesting one. I don't want to call it. I'm not going to dare to call that one. But what do you think, Paul?
Yeah, I'm with you. I think it's a fascinating. I think it's a fascinating game. I think on the face of it, you would say Thunder, but I do think there's an element of what Birmingham have been doing. Feels like it's coming together. They've obviously been missing a couple of key players. The point about Jess Shaw is a good one. I think if Jess Shaw is or can be fit, I think it might just give them the edge if Thunder's injuries, are kind of continuing to kind of not hinder them, but that it's just a reality, isn't it? Yeah, it's just the reality of it. You've kind of got to deal with it. So. Yeah, maybe it might be a bit of a surprise, I think, there if Panthers take it, but, none of us would be shocked if Thunder are able to pull it out.
Yeah. I'll also be there. So,
of course.
My turn on the ground. Yes, I'll be in the thick of it. But it's in an arena, and it's, again, to Claire's wonderful point about Forest, we don't know what the Panthers fans look like either, so that's going to be a nice little lesson. And to see, I think, for both games, how the clubs have done in entrenching themselves in their community and bringing fans in. I think that's another piece we're going to look at, as we did with this round, start at the top and look off the court, and I'll be looking at that.
That's interesting, yeah. We should look forward to that. Sunday, I suppose, game of the round, it's fair to say, Lightnin versus Pulse. Claire, there are matchups. Can you pick 1, 2 matchups from this? It looks like there are 7 all over the court.
Oh, my word. This is an extremely early prediction.
Go on.
But you're hearing it here first. I'm predicting this is going to be our grand final match.
Okay.
I'm going a Pulse Lightnin final this year.
Okay.
From what I've seen so far, from from
From
60
round one.
minutes of netball so far.
That's what all the new rules, the cutting the squad. This was all it was all building to predicting after round one the grand final.
Absolutely. I think from what we've seen, from what we've seen on both sides, really excited to see perhaps how the Pulse defence go against a rotating circle. Again, we don't know kind of the situation on Wallace and when she'll be back. I think you've got some formidable matchups in that middle court. Excited to see the battle of the centres, in particular, Orr and Panagari. I think Panagari is just so solid in that middle. She defends, she feeds, she settles. You know, she injects pace, she slows it down. She's an engine there. But all seem to be very similar in the Pulse game today, or not today, on the first round. And then again, you've got kind of the defensive pressure from Lightnin against a very confident attacking end of Pulse. So I think the nerves of steel are going to be required from either end from the shooters, but there is going to be no love loss in either defence end. So I think it's going to be a battle of the mid-court in terms of just steadying the ship through court. And then, a little bit of a battle going on either end, I predict. I don't know who. I honestly don't know.
No,
I'm going to say this is going to go to extra time.
Nothing is ruled.
Claire, I love it.
I know, it's bold. It's probably the most bold I've ever been, I think.
Chloe, could you pick just one battle out? I mean, there are 7 pretty much as good as international standard matchups right across the court. So it's hard. But is there anything that leaps out?
Looking at what Thunder did in terms of moving Amy Carter to wing defence, I'm going to say that Zara Everett and Hannah Joseph is going to be a big one
That's what
in terms of.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
Look at us. Look at us. And I would just add, we saw Shadeen going up against her old team, and maybe hard to deny the extra impetus, I think, that we saw, and then the performance that she had. She was player of the match. Berry Neal's going to have a big shift. And I think, Claire, maybe you can speak to this a little bit, but I know from chatting to players that they do just that match when you go back to your old club, it puts a fire in your belly.
Yeah, it does. It does give you that kind of extra edge. I don't know what it is, but it's that kind of you feel like you've got something to prove, and you want to demonstrate kind of your skill set, and you want to do well in your new colours, so I think that does definitely give another element of fire into her game. So I think Berry will definitely be one to watch.
And then final game of the round, Mavericks and Rhinos. Maybe 2 teams who we're kind of not sure what to expect. I think after what we've seen so far, maybe 2 teams that might fancy their chances of maybe challenging for the top 4. It feels to me like an interesting one. It feels like whilst 2 teams might have maybe growing expectation, we're still finding out a little bit more about them, and I think that in itself makes it a fairly fascinating battle there.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think, these 2 teams both came from behind in round 1, so they were both kind of chasing the game. Rhinos, arguably, were the first to kind of break the momentum and swung it pretty early after the second quarter. Mavs a little bit slower to maybe shift that momentum. Again, you can't not talk about the defensive unit of Mavs. I think Raz is on top form at the moment, so she's going to want to assert herself pretty early on. Her against Joyce Mavula, what a matchup. That is going to be another one to keep your eye out. But yeah, so we've obviously seen kind of a sense of fight back from both teams, and are both kind of capable of staying and maintaining in the game, but then also taking a lead. So yeah, I think another really tricky one to call early on. Rhinos, to me, I think, based on now their performance in the Super Cup, the way they kind of maintained composure and control in the first round, for me, I think Rhinos just have the edge. I think in terms of kind of how their confidence is building from Super Cup to round one, now into round two, I think Rhinos might have the edge on it for me.
I think I completely agree with Claire. I think Raz Joyce, that's two player of the matches going up against each other. I'll be interested. For me, one of the great insights from Kerry Almond in commentary was you have to keep Joyce moving. And Raz is an older head than Jazz Brown, and I think Camilla Buchanan has had to coach against Joyce Mavula a fair few times, so that'd be interesting to see what Mavericks do. But we do know that Vicky Oyosola took a massive hit, so we're not sure what that looks like defensively, obviously for Mavericks. I want to pick out one battle that I think I would love to get my popcorn for, as it were. Susie Liversiege and Cassie Howard at wing attacking defence. I thought Liversiege did a great job, just a job at wing attack, where she's sort of finding her feet now, having kind of transitioned out of goal attack. And Cassie Howard is just really becoming a bit of a force of nature at wing defence for Rhinos. So that one I think is going to be really cool. And then another battle will be interesting to see, is Jiva on Emily Andrew. Emily Andrew, to my mind, was moved quite a lot by Leah Middleton. And obviously, Leah got penalised for it. But Jiva, after what we saw in round one, I think Emily Andrew is going to have to brace.
Welcome to the Super League, Emily, it feels like, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah, well, actually, Paul, on this, the contesting, and Claire, it'd be great to get your insight too. We were told repeatedly on commentary, umpires have been told to allow more contesting. That was the vibe, that was coming out of it, was that we blow the whistle too much in NSL. Now, I don't know about you guys, but apart from one umpire in one game, I felt that everybody was blowing their whistle a lot. So, and look, we did have two things that I absolutely worthy of suspension. So on a serious note, I think those were pinged, but I didn't see the contesting. What do you reckon, Paul?
Yeah, I think it's a very fair statement, to be fair. I kind of feel like, again, it's round one. I'm going to compare it a little bit to football, when there's brand new rules are brought in, and it's like everyone seems to go overboard with them. And a couple of years ago, it was something, what was it, added time, and we were getting 12 and 15 minutes of added time, and then after 2 weeks, that kind of burnt out. If the idea was almost to use round one and round two to get a feel for how physical the game's going to be, and then maybe temper it down, I'm all right with that if that's the way it works. But I do agree with you. I do think there was maybe more whistle than we thought. But I do think it'd be interesting to see how it evolves. That's probably where I come down on it.
Claire?
Yeah, no, I think I would agree with both of you. I didn't notice kind of too much change from what we've expected to see from kind of last season to this season. The beauty around kind of the connection with the umpires is you do get to kind of speak to the umpires after the game, and they are so heavily critiqued. I say I couldn't be a shooter. I 100% definitely couldn't be an umpire. Now, talk of scrutiny, they get scrutinised by their assessors, and then they have to go and speak to kind of both captains at the end of the game. So I think first round, second round, I would imagine we're kind of all in this learning bubble, if you like, and it's important that we raise these things of a kind of, are we feeling there's a difference from one end to the other? That used to feel quite frustrating, having a level of contact left one end, and then you're having to adjust your play down the other end because you feel that there's a difference in how much contest is being allowed to go. You're always going to get that to an extent. I appreciate that, but I think we absolutely do kind of need to be encouraging more consistency over that between both ends. But again, I think I feel confident in that kind of umpires have that kind of regular chat amongst one another as they're well connected with players, captains, coaches, etc. I know some will even go into training session, or used to be able to go into training sessions, or some I've seen in Premiership team, just to be able to kind of practice, etc. And spread what's being allowed, what's not being allowed. So I think jury's out for round 1, round 2, but not so much change from last season to this season so far.
Great, I think that was very fair. I think everybody let's give it some time.
Let's see.
And see.
I think let's see is fair. Okay, so that's round 2. We'll be back again to kind of review it, but I think for now, have we got questions, Chloe? Did you gather any questions, or I think we answered them?
Well,
Go on.
We had the question about injury, and what, which I think was kind of pertinent to what we were talking about with the round 2 preview, where and it'd be great to put it to Claire actually, because as a player, with what do you think, Claire, with injuries, how transparent should clubs be? Are there things that fans perhaps not factoring into the equation in terms of, I would like to know this then by this date, but then also looking in on other sports and how they do it? Paul, we can speak certainly for like basketball. You can say that a player is out and you normally have to bracket why, but you can also say a player is, what's the term that they use when they're not sure if they've got illness? There's you can say, is it possible or probable?
Yeah. NFL has the same as well, like questionable. Yeah. They have an injury report that comes out. I mean, NFL is slightly different to the NBA because it's like a full 5-6 day period, and as of 3 days out, I can't remember if it's 2 or 3 days out, there's an injury report, and you have to put did not practice, questionable, whatever it might be. That's clearly, we're not at that level, but I think there is a level of transparency in American sport. I think that UK sport in general could learn from, to be fair. But go on, to a wider point, Claire, is there something that maybe the teams kind of have to maybe be a little bit more careful at times?
Yeah, I think that's always been a really kind of interesting point. I think because netball has predominantly been, I would say, quite closed in information around injury, I think sometimes that can create, you don't always want kind of other teams knowing who people have got, who they haven't got. I think, though, probably being a bit more open-minded if we're looking at other sports, and we should be, if we're on this path of professionalism, we have to be drawing upon experiences of other professions. There is clear structure and more kind of policy, I suppose, in what's expected around injury and communication with injury. Again, there should be perhaps a timescale, a timeline when obviously it's announced. The detail of that, I think that's where I've kind of got maybe my psych hat on, and for whatever reason, I think sometimes maybe athletes don't feel comfortable in sharing their kind of business. So I think that has to be an open conversation with the athlete around what they do feel willing to share, what they don't feel willing to share. But I think in terms of being able to kind of know who's injured, a rough expectation of time scale, who's being replaced, etc., I feel like that's kind of where we should start for like the basics almost that should be required.
I think that's really interesting because, Paul, do you remember how Karen sort of, when we asked her what the state of play was in the interview, she sort of listed them off very articulately, but we didn't necessarily have a full timeline in terms of weeks. And I think we have to be realistic also in that we don't know always with injury.
Yeah.
You don't know how it's going to rehab. You don't know how it's going to evolve. If there's surgery, what that looks like. If, as you said, Claire, what the nature of that injury is as well. Maybe it's intimate, but maybe it's also quite an obscure injury, and you're just not in the business of sharing that information. And at Paul, I think you and I spoke about this, and you said, what if it affects their day job that they talk, Can they turn up to their day job because of their injury? Do they want that information out publicly? So we're still, I think, in this weird sort of bridge area, even though we've and you know, professionalization we've been told is going to take some time. So, but I definitely think it'd be great to see some kind of policy, is a great word, Claire, to flesh out some sort of communication policy, because I think sometimes if you as a club come out and go, this person took this fall and like they're injured, then everybody stops asking questions as well, because it's just out there and more transparency. The fans just go, okay, cool, understood.
I kind of think this is almost not necessarily netball's fault here, but because, and I've been big on this for a very long time since I started covering the sport, is I think any top level sport needs a media to be able to hold it to account on every level, and that doesn't mean criticising it all the time. That means, you know, at a press conference for a Premier League game or a Premiership rugby game or a Six Nations match, there are questions and coaches can answer them, and they can give as much or as little as they want away. And at the moment, we don't have a media that can hold those type of conference calls or whatever it is on a let's hypothetically say a Thursday or a Friday before game day, where that information might become readily available and then might be reported on. So until such a time as maybe we get there in terms of media coverage, then I think maybe it maybe falls on the teams themselves to be able to deliver that information. And I know not everybody has got a huge media department that can do a 3-minute interview with the coach, like after training. And so again, you get into the weeds here, and it becomes difficult. So I'm not saying there's an immediate answer to it, but I do think again I think we find ourselves continually, and we have said, Chloe, that we want to pose these questions. We find ourselves in that half space of like, well, okay, how far along the line do we go here? And I've always said this, if we don't have a media that's going to kind of ask the question, then I think the clubs have to be a bit more forthcoming in putting the information out where they can and where the athletes are comfortable. That's my opinion on it.
Very, very reasonable. Gosh, we've been very reasonable today.
Too reasonable, perhaps. Did say I agree with Claire a lot, which is a good sign, I think.
Me too.
Okay, cool. In which case, I kind of think that's pretty much us done. Thanks for listening. First of all, I think, Chloe, you and I have said a few times now, we've been pretty blown away by the early support. It still staggers us that we've got this up and running and that people are listening and watching. So it's the start for us, and hopefully we'll get bigger and better as we go. And to do that, we like to hear from everybody. We like your questions, and the usual rules apply. Follow us, share us, rate us, review us, all those things, good and bad. We're happy to learn our lessons.
We're dishing it out so we can take it as well.
We can take it, yeah, we can absolutely take it. And obviously, today in particular, thanks to Sam Bird, and a huge thanks to you, Claire. I hope you enjoyed it.
Oh, I loved it, guys. Thank you so much for the invite. It was really lovely of you to think of me, so thank you very much.
Thank you. So
Thank you
that's me and Chloe signing off, and Claire too. We're definitely going to have you back. I think you made a good impression on us. Definitely have you back. And yeah, we'll speak to you next time.
Bye.